Hi, it's Marisol, your rebel guide to living a life of freedom abroad, bringing you an episode of Roaming the Now, where entrepreneurs, coaches, and mentors come together to give you a behind the scenes look at the real and raw experience of setting out to a new country and building a life and business abroad. Make sure to like and subscribe to Roaming the Now. Enjoy! Hello, and welcome to another episode of Roaming the Now. This is your host, Marisol, and I am here with a familiar face. You probably recognize Michael Multari from season 1, and he is back to chat with us around how does moving abroad change you. But before we dive into that really juicy, dynamic topic, for those who do not know who you are, Michael, would you please take some time to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. And it's a pleasure being back with you, Marisol. Thank you for the invite. Um, I have a background in teaching and in education. I was a teacher and administrator for 26 years, and I had spent most of my life in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I decided in the spring of 2018 that I was going to pursue a personal dream. And to do that, I would have to sell everything I own and leave the job I loved, leave my friends, leave the support systems, and move to Cali, Colombia to start a travel company. I started Todo Bien Colombia as a gift, if you will, to myself to try to pursue a dream before it's too late. And so I've really enjoyed this journey. And through that, it led me to coaching. My former head of school for 16 years, when he retired, he started a coaching business for independent school leaders. And he invited me to be one of his coaches. So for the last 3 years, I've been coaching executives at the independent school level. And then I also started my own coaching practice as well. So within the three of those things, being a tour operator, basically an owner, being a coach for another company, and a coach for myself, I've learned a lot these last 4 years that I've been living in Cali.
Yeah, I was gonna ask. I was gonna be like, how long have you been in Cali now? 4 years.
Yep.
4 years. Okay. So I'm gonna guide it to this one. When you think about how you've changed, like the biggest change, like off the top of your head, like the first thing that comes to mind, how do you think over the past 4 years you have changed the most?
Yeah, I've been wrestling with this question for the last several weeks that we've been going, setting this up. And the first thing that came to my mind yesterday when I was thinking about this, I'm like, how do I describe it? And do you remember? I don't know if this is true or not, but supposedly someone asked Michelangelo how, like, when he looks at a block of granite or whatever it is, like, how do you know where the statue is? And he said, like, the statue is always there. I just needed to chisel away at it. And I think for me, like, I've been working on myself and working on these types of questions for a long time. And so for me, like, how did moving abroad change me? I think I've grown in certain areas, which I'll get into, but I think I was always there. I was always ready. I was prepared, if that makes any sense whatsoever.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is moving abroad has made you more of you.
I think that is perfectly said. Yes. When I think about it, like, one of the questions that comes up, or one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot, especially working with clients, is the idea of success, right? And I think from a coaching standpoint, what we want is we want our clients to do small little increments where they can gain success, and success breeds confidence, right? And so I'm north of 50 years old. And when I was in my 20s, like, I didn't have this stuff. Like, I knew I wanted to be the best I could be. Like, I didn't necessarily know what that meant. But I think in my own personal journey, Marisol, I think it was important for me to have a series of successes, which gave me the confidence to want to be that most authentic person that I could be, right? And so it took a lot of time because I waited 48 years to get to the point where I was like, you know what? I think I can go out on my own and leave the comfort of being in school. And so, yeah, like, so how did it change me? I think you said it perfectly. Like, I'm being more me now than I think I ever have in my life.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And I'm going to ask you like a juicier question. In what ways do you feel that you're actually allowing yourself to be more you?
Yeah, another good one. I think I stopped apologizing. Like, I think I stopped apologizing for being me. I used to apologize all the time, like, or the other thing is play small, right? Like, I think for me, growing up in my 20s and into my 30s, I was taught, I always believed that humility is really something you need to carry. And I'm like, you know, humble. I totally understand being humble. I consider myself somewhat humble, but at what expense, right? If my humility keeps me from playing big or thinking big, then it's not serving me, right? And so I think for me, a question that I've been wrestling with for a long time is what thoughts and beliefs about myself do I need to change in order to get to where I want?
Mhm. Yeah.
And that's hard. That's hard. I just want to say that. And it takes time and it takes practice and it takes confidence to to ask those questions and then try to answer them.
Yeah. You know, I'm gonna reflect something back to you as someone who has like a very like trauma informed background. You know, there are not always logical reasons why we think what we think or we feel what we feel. And so whenever we are getting to the root of like why do I play small, like that's when emotional processing works comes in. Like that's when we can utilize tools like somatics. Obviously with like a trained practitioner who knows how to like maintain that psychological safety as well as keeping you safe in your nervous system because that thought or belief has an emotional root. So you have to get to the emotional root to process it. But when we like start to look at those roots, as you said, it's hard and it actually like doesn't always feel good. As someone who has spent most of the summer, I would say getting into a lot of the emotional roots that I had in my life around a lot of different things, I discovered that, wow, like, I get why people are always like, oh, I want to like, change and I want to do this. But then, once it starts to get hard and you start to hit those pain points, they're like, yeah, no, tap out. I'm done.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, that, wow. And I think I heard one in one of your podcasts recently. I can't remember. I think you said it. And I love this line of being comfortable in discomfort, right?
Mhm.
And and I think when you can do that with yourself, when you can sit there in the quiet and say, okay, what? And I think you did. I think I might be robbing something from what you said in this podcast, but what what are the thoughts that are coming into my head? And to take it a step further is how are they serving me, right? And if those thoughts are not serving me, then I don't want to hold them anymore. It's just it's a waste of energy, and we only have so much energy to give to something, and I'd rather focus that energy towards something that's important to me. And one of the things that a question that's been coming up for me, and especially with the clients I'm working with, is like, what are your wildest dreams? Right? And believe me, being north of 50, I know the sun is going to be setting a lot sooner than if I was, 25. Right? And so I'm like, I ask myself that often, like, what are my wildest dreams? And what thoughts would I need to change if I haven't achieved them just yet?
Mhm. Yeah. I would propose, like, maybe it's not thoughts, maybe it's like what energy needs to shift. Because as like, we're taught at IPEC, I'm going to talk about IPEC because that's
Hmm.
actually how me and Michael connected is in the IPEC community. It's a coaching school. If anyone is interested in it, they talk about the energy levels, right? So it really is, I feel like there's so much emphasis right now on thoughts, right? Especially in coaching. And I respect that because that's just the model that it is. But when we really dive into it, it is what energy needs to shift. And when we think about energy, what is energy? Well, it's emotions, right? Like emotions don't really have logic. It's just things that we feel. And when we feel them, then those cause either a reaction or response outside of us. So, like when I hear you say, like, what wildest dreams, do I have? Like when I hear you say that, like immediately I don't go to, okay, what do I need to like change that I think, right? For me, it goes like, what do I want to feel like, right? Like in that wildest dream of mine, what do I want to feel like? Okay, so how can I create in my day to day life feeling that way? And this is where, like, more, I guess we could say, like books like Compound Effect. Like, I've always loved that book because it talks about how small changes lead to massive changes. And it's like, if you can tap into the feeling, the emotion, the sensation of what it really is like to be in your wildest dream, little by little, day by day, maybe year by year, all of a sudden it's here. And you're like, whoa, well, like, was that quick? Or did it just happen, you know?
Absolutely, that's brilliant. Yes, I 100% agree with you. It's like building those moments. Like when I think of the wildest dreams for me, I think of the word awe, right?
Mm,
I want to be in awe. And so I think, to your point, like spending the energy I have on the daily on achieving that awe. What do I find awe in, right? When I'm not in the moment of doing my wildest dreams. As far as I'm concerned, I'm living my wildest dream right now. And and so finding those moments of awe to continue to search out that creativity, search out that energy where I do want to put my energy towards, and to really say, how am I feeling about this when I'm in awe? I'm excited. Like I want to move forward. I want to share with other people. I want to learn something, right? And so I think what that brings me to in terms of way like articulating it is also understanding values. And what are your values? And are your behaviors in alignment with your values?
yeah.
So I love what yeah, thank you for sharing that. That was
Yeah.
potent.
Yeah, of course. The mentor that I work with puts a lot of work on values because if you don't know your values, then you kind of like it's hard to take action in alignment with what you actually want, right? Like if you don't put a name to it. And the thing is that people don't really realize is that like our values change like as seasons like we change, right?
Mhm.
And so it's really important to revisit your values. I would say every 3 6 months, like, is this values like system that I have right now aligned with the vision that I have? Has my vision changed? If it has, then what needs to be, switched around in terms of priorities? There's always going to be some things that stay the same, but obviously, depending on what that new, like for me, what is the next bold move I'm going to make it going to be? Like, it's going to shift a little bit. But what I'm really hearing, if we're thinking of how all of this relates to like how does moving abroad changing you, there's a level of self-awareness definitely that has come to you. And there's also a level of like, wow, time is precious. And like, you want to live in those moments of awe. So how can you do that? And how can you like live into that? And so I would love to hear in your words though, like your own summary of like if you were to put a characteristic name on it, like how has moving abroad changed you like character wise?
I think if yeah, that's awesome. I think magnifying, like I've become magnified, right? So if I was Mike when I landed here at like 1, now I'm magnified and I feel like I'm Mike at 5, magnification of 5, right? And that goes with, okay, what are the things that give me awe, right? Like, what are the things that really get me excited? Yes, so if I'm running a trip through my company and I'm on, on a boat in the Caribbean and the wind's blowing in my hair and I'm like, yeah, this is pretty freaking awesome. Like, this is awesome. If I'm with a client and, we're having a moment where they're like finding out, like, this is really important to me. This is, being vulnerable or being their authentic self is really coming out, then I'm in awe of that experience. I also find awe, honestly, like that morning coffee at like 6:15 when the birds in the big tree across the street are chirping and I see streaks of blue and orange and yellow and green just like going by. And I'm like, I'm in awe that I actually had a vision of my life. I created it and I'm living it. And so reminding myself that it doesn't have to be the boat on the Caribbean surrounded by clients. It could just be that morning coffee where I'm still and I'm like, yes, you wanted this and you have it.
Yeah. It's so synchronistic that you say that because right before our call, there's been a lot of movement in my life, all in a positive direction. And I was just kind of feeling like I need a moment of peace and stillness. So I like took my time. I went and made my espresso. Like I'm big on making my own cappuccinos. It's like something really relaxing for me. And then I went outside and I just like put my feet in the pool. I have a view of the mountains from the pool and like drink my coffee. And I was like, wow, like how grateful am I that this is my life on a Wednesday during the week at 2:30 p.m. I think really for me it's the gratitude of like, if this can be a Wednesday for me, like this can be a Wednesday for you. Like that was what was really coming out of like if I can do this, you can do this too. And I think that that's where, you know, through a lot of conversations with individuals who want to move abroad, there's so much packed into it, like fear. I've talked around that a lot, and it is kind of like, learning how to, I would say, dance with fear instead of like letting it completely like stop you in your tracks. But I have actually a really interesting question for you because, we're on this same length of just really finding appreciation, gratitude, awe, whatever it is, in really simple things, right? That I don't think I had that when I lived in the US, but how have your values changed since moving to Cali, Colombia? Like, what would you say you valued more in the US and now, like, that you are in Cali? Like, what actually is your values?
Yeah, that's awesome. So I started my career as a history teacher. And so I'm very like one of my favorite things is politics, government. I still pay very close attention to it. And one of the things about the United States over these last, let's call it 6 years, 7 years, has been, in my mind, an increase of intellectual dishonesty. Like I I want to have a conversation. I want to be challenged. As a coach, I'm going to challenge you to think differently. You can, balk at that or say, I'm not sure if I agree I, but I want to have that extraordinary conversation, right? And I just feel that for me, authenticity and being intellectually honest with yourself and with the people around you is extremely important. And I feel like the discourse that we're having, or maybe lack thereof, in the States, because I was taught, I was born in the, 71. I remember in 1976, the bicentennial, and we were taught as a child that the United States is the greatest country in the world, hands down, the greatest country in the world. And so as someone who loves history and someone who loves politics, I question that all the time, right? There we have a huge history that shows us not being the greatest country in the world. And so I said to myself, one of the things I want to really look at is in dissecting that. What does it mean to be the greatest of anything, right? And over my lifetime, when I think of great people or great people, I think of people who are always trying to become better. They admit mistakes, they admit to failures, they relish those things and say, hey, this is an opportunity for growth. And so for me, what's become more magnified is I'm really drawn to that level of honesty. And let's not say we're the greatest, because and again, this is my opinion, right? Like, what's so great about us? Now, living in a new country, I get to see a completely different way of living. And I arrived with the intention of having childish eyes. I want to look at something through the lens of a child. And I want that innocence. I want that excitement. And I've been able to see, wow, there's a lot of special things here that we don't have in the US, and obviously vice versa. But I no longer have that idea that there can be the greatest country. Like, that's no longer relevant to me. Like, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's the type of I'm looking for the struggle. I'm looking for, yes, we struggle, we fall, and we get up and we keep moving.
Yeah. I think what I'm hearing is really like it's changed you, like in terms of you value honest conversation around like the truth of what's actually happening. You know? I think like for me, when I see what's happening in the US from here, I'm like, are we really that progressive? Because it seems like a lot of things are going backwards. I think what I'm hearing from you is like, hey, like I'd rather you tell me the truth and we can have a challenging, honest conversation about it than you just tell me the white lies to get on by.
Yeah. And not only that, but like when I think of myself, and I can only speak, I'm an expert in myself. And I wasn't great. I didn't have confidence. I didn't have experience. I was scared. And I started my path on a very linear trajectory because it was safe, right? And and so I don't want to like anyone to think like, oh, here's this guy talking about living the dream, but there was a whole lot of stuff that I had to go through. I had, you know, two, we'll call them unsuccessful marriages. I've been fired from jobs. I've had at one point I didn't have really any money, any savings. So that's also the experience. And let's just be honest there, right? There has to be a level of confidence to be able to say, yeah, man, I could have done things better. And I've learned from them. And so I will not repeat those mistakes because that's what life's about. It's about learning and moving forward. And we are going to repeat the same mistakes if we don't learn from the original ones, right? From the original tries. And so I'm very much about, like, let's just be honest about that. Let's just say that whether we're a country or a person, a team, whatever it is, like, what can we learn and how do we move forward together?
Yeah, it makes me think of that quote. I don't know who says it, but they're saying like madness is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. Who says that?
That's great. I can't tell you because I love that quote. I do. And the other one that's kind of similar is when you can no longer change your situation, the only thing left to change is yourself.
Hmm.
Okay. And that I think is what I'm describing. And it's like, okay, wait, I've made a lot of mistakes. I've made a lot of errors in my life. And it's like, but wait, what was the constant? It was me, right?
Hmm.
And so if I don't want to repeat them, I have to have this change of thought. I have to have a change of emotion. I have to have a change of behavior.
Yeah. And I personally really feel like we all have our own journeys, right? And we all have our own lessons that we came here to learn. We came here to learn them. And it's like, here, that was the lesson that needed to be learned. I always feel like whenever I don't know, the words like errors and mistakes, it's kind of like, "Nah, I don't know." Like, was it for me, I'm always kind of like questioning, well, was it really an error and mistake? Because if I had not done that, I would not have learned what actually I needed to learn and get me to the point that I am at. And, this is where I feel like it kind of comes into, right? Every person's unique. Some people learn and they get it, right? Some people don't learn, so they don't get it. And then some people, like me in the past, I really did choose to learn the hard way around a lot of things. Now my lessons are a lot softer because I decided that doesn't have to be hitting the wall to learn the lesson all the time. But yeah, that is really where I think, moving abroad and how it changes you. I feel like it really causes you to look inward, right? Look at you because, yeah, you're in a new country, but the only thing that's the same is you. So that's where I find that individuals I talk to, they're like, wow, like, so is like living abroad just like the greatest thing ever? And I'm like, well, first of all, it's cool for like 3 months and then you're sitting with yourself. And so if you're not doing the thing that you were, working on that thing that like, kind of was enticing you to escape your life, it's going to come up again. And so I think that, really big introspection comes up, when we move abroad. I also think your beliefs being challenged, right? Like the whole like way you view the world changed because you go to a different country and then everything is just different and you're like, "Oh wow." Like there's so many different ways of doing things and I think for me, I'm just gonna add this one in there. I think moving abroad has changed me just having a whole lot of like compassion for myself as well as for other people. I don't know about you.
100%.
You tell me.
100%. Yeah, 100%. And I also, to go back to to piggyback on what you were saying earlier, the grass is always greener where you water it. Right? And so, when you go someplace and you're like, "Oh, I'm gonna change everything, this is gonna be so much better." Like, well, what happens if you stayed back wherever you were and took care of business before you made the jump? Because you're gonna keep finding, like, wherever you go, there you are. So, I think it behooves us to really understand, like, who you are where like, wherever you are.
Yeah, I feel like that was really the, like, theme of season 1 of Roaming the Now, it was like, "Wherever you go, there you are," and it is really true, like, wherever you go, there you are, and I'll be, like, completely honest, there have been times in my because 'cause I've lived here in my home, like, planted, like, in a pot, and I'm growing, for almost a year, but there have been times where things have gotten tough, and I've had that, like, instinct of, like, "Oh, I need to move. Oh, I need to go on a trip." While it's great to explore and get out of your routine, it's kind of just understanding like what is the motivation, right? Like am I genuinely wanting to go and explore to just kind of like, relax outside of my usual routine. I mean, I wouldn't actually say like when I leave my town, it's mostly like more to city, so I wouldn't call that relaxing. I would call it more of an adventure. Like so am I leaving for truly like a sense of adventure, expansion, or is there something that I'm trying to run away from? And that's where I always tell people, like, honestly, this is probably one of the greatest, like, decisions that I made to, like, have a home, stay in a place that is, like, very tranquil, like, tranquilo, like, quiet, nature, because there is just so much time to spend with myself to really, really get to know myself, to help with the authenticity, right? To understand, like, what are the beliefs that are like subconsciously running or through my head and I don't realize it, or consciously running, and like having the space to just be quiet and still and decide like what do I want to do next. And I found that when I was living in the city there was just so much distraction, like I didn't have access to that. I also think like the whole keeping up with the Joneses thing like is very very big like thing in the US, and I
Absolutely.
like don't really, I don't feel that, you know? Like, I don't feel the need to buy every like, new iPhone that comes out. I'm kind of like, "Okay, is my iPhone 12 still, like, kicking it and working it? Okay, great. We'll settle for that."
No, no, and I think that goes back to values, and, two exercises jump into my mind based on what you were just saying. One is take moments, and what are your values? Like, list them. What are the things, and you don't need a list of 30. Like, what are the core values? Like, what are these that, like, for me, kindness, right? For me, lifelong learning, fun. Those are my three major values. And so those I can take with me anywhere and everywhere. And so I think it's important if we take the time, what are our values? You could say family, friendships, working, whatever it may be. And the other thing that kind of you kind of ignited my tickled my brain is one of my clients said the other day is like taking time and just what do you want for yourself? Like, what do you really want? And so many people are like, what? Like, I don't know. Don't ask me that. I'm afraid. But like, if I always think if this is my last day, where what would I have wished I've done? And so I'm like, okay, today I did everything that I set out to do. And I don't know if you use this word or not, but intention. What are your intentions?
Yeah. I didn't use that word today, I think, but I use that word a lot.
It's a
Intentions
powerful one.
intentions is like, I would say intention is really how I go about my day to day, right? And I think what really like stood out for me like when you were talking was like success, like what do you really want for yourself? Like people are just I don't want to say I mean I'm actually just gonna say people are running on autopilot, most of
Mhm.
society. And if you're listening to this like it's okay, like most of society is running on autopilot. So if when you are asked what do you want for yourself and you're like a deer in the headlights, that's because like you weren't really given the space to get to know you, to get to know yourself, to be like, this is actually what I want and follow that. And I think that it's really important that you give yourself grace to understand, like, oh, wow, well, I just like, I wasn't given that opportunity to know what that looks like, but here is an opportunity to create what that looks like. And I think that that's where a lot of people can get stuck is that it's like, oh, like for example, I want to like I don't know, I think the most popular like thing that everyone wants is I want a six-figure business, right? Wow, that's great. Okay, like I'm so happy for you. But like what is your relationship with money? Have you ever experienced having six figures in your life? And usually people are like, "Well, no. Okay, well like how do you know what that feels like?" And they're like, "Well, I think it feels like this." And like there's just like I use money because everyone always thinks, "Oh, the more money I have, like the happier I'll get." While like having money does make your life easier, it is a tool, it has no correlation to your happiness. And I find that with me and the clients that I work with, there is a lot of work around like, okay, like society told you money equals this. but I want you to come up with your own definition. And I think that actually plays into like when you do move abroad, your definitions of things change so much, right?
Yeah.
Definition of money, you're dealing with a different currency. Definition of communication. There are like certain things that like if I were to shake your hand and give you a kiss on the cheek in the US, people would be like, what the hell?
Mhm.
But here, that's a very normal.
For sure. No, you're I love what struck me the most is your definitions change when you live in another country. Like, what is success? Right? Like, what's my success? I'm successful. Like, what was my definition of success before I came here to what it is now? It's like, I'm successful every single day because I'm living the life that I want. Some people might say, well, you didn't have 100 people come through Todo Bien Colombia to see Colombia this year. So maybe you didn't make a lot of money. So maybe you're not successful. But that's not how I measure success. I measure success. I'm doing what I set out to do. Right. And so I loved how you said that. You change what your definitions are. And and I think that's another major way how moving abroad has changed me.
Yeah, my definition of success now, is actually like, do I have time to just like go sit down outside in the grass and just put my feet in the grass and take a deep breath? If I have time to do that in my life, I know that I am living my version of being successful because it's really not about it's not about all the external things anymore, I noticed for me. Like since like leaving the US and just like not having so much noise and just yeah, I'm just gonna call it noise. It really is just like, do I have time and space to just sit and be in peace? Okay, great. Have that. And that is what being successful is for me.
Yeah, and I think again, said it earlier, is like keeping up with the Joneses, not having enough time to think, not having enough examples of what asking yourself those questions like, well, what do I want my life to look like? What are my wildest dreams? Who am I? Like in the United States, I think that that doesn't happen, right? That doesn't, I agree with you wholeheartedly. And and so the noise, as you say, kind of dissipates living in a different country because there's different rhythms, there's different energies, there's different values. And again, like I keep coming back to values because I truly believe there's something to that. And living abroad, you're able to challenge your own values a lot quicker and your assumptions a lot quicker because you're constantly learning anew.
Yeah, I think I was watching like How to Live to 100. It was like a documentary on Netflix. I don't know if you did you watch it?
I did not.
Okay. So it's this person who studies like I can't believe I'm blanking on the word. What is it called? Like he studies blue zones, like when you live over 100, what are you called a centenarian? Yeah.
Centenarian or something like
Yeah.
that.
Mhm. And he was going around all these different countries all around the world, and when he was, like, understanding, like, these blue zones, the things that were all kind of similar in terms of, right, like, a study, amongst these different zones around the world that were blue were, like, community or,
Mm,
like, support, having a purpose in your life. Yes, there was diet and stuff, but it seemed like most of the major correlations were around these things of just like having that community, having that support, having that purpose. And that has to do a lot with values. And I think, personally for me, is taking a step back, in the US, it's a very individualistic like culture. That's really what's happening. Then you step outside of the US, it's very collectivist, you know?
yes,
And so to have the contrast, right? And just to know like the positives, the negatives, and like kind of understand it all, you're like, whoa, like there's so many different ways to live your life. And I think kind of as we said in our episode originally, like neither is good or bad. It's just finding that way that works for you.
absolutely. And one of my favorite things, which I didn't do in the US, are my weekly lunches with my family. and those lunches are like 2 hours, and the whole like, everyone that works in Cali basically gets 2 hours of lunch, and that is to be with community, that is to be with family, that is to be with friends, and wow, like, for me, I love that because that becomes that, yeah, we're in this together. We're not only that, but we create stories together. We create bonds. You create, yeah, you create purpose together. And I love the intention of, okay, today's Thursday. I'm going to have lunch with my family, and this is going to be good. And I love that because in the United States, 2 hour lunches, like go home to your family, like that doesn't exist. And
That
so
doesn't.
that's one thing I really appreciate and I have a lot of gratitude for is that component of what you were saying, like slowing down.
Yeah, yeah. I said this. I don't know when I said this. I said it to a couple people. I don't know if I've talked about it on the podcast. Maybe this is my first time, but I kind of was just thinking to myself, like, oh, why are humans like burning out and why is everyone so miserable? It's because they're acting like robots. Like, no one's meant to be on 24/7. You're not meant to be like a computer. I know that it's driven by capitalism, productivity, produce, produce, produce. But the truth is like you're a human being, like you're part of nature. Let's look at nature. It has cycles. Has cycles of, rest and growth. And then, just it's you're just not meant to be on all the time. And I think that that's where, you know, takes a lot of work to realize that though, to
Yeah, it
get
does.
it out of
And
your
it
head.
takes and it takes even more work, not only to realize it, but then to do something about it. And
Mhm.
again, like going back to the original question, like how does moving abroad change you? You got to look at yourself in the mirror every day. And so if that is uncomfortable for you at home, wherever your home may be, it's going to be uncomfortable for you wherever you land. And I think asking those quintessential questions of who am I? What are my wildest dreams? If today's the last day on the planet, what do I wish to accomplish? Like these are things that for me, I love to wrestle with. It's a challenge because the only person I'm challenging is myself. And I'm the only one who gets in my way. No one else does. So yeah, I love a great challenge.
Definitely. So, okay, let's summarize this.
Let's
If
do
we
it.
were to, yeah, let's put this into like a three-sentence summary. So, how does moving abroad change you?
I I want to say it magnifies who you already are. It provides you more opportunity for growing and self-reflection. And I think that's it.
Okay. We'll leave it at two. It's fine. If those are the top two, we'll just leave it at that.
Top
Um,
2. That's what I came up with.
the top
Would you
two
add a
ways
would you
moving
add a
abroad
third one? What would
changes
you
you.
add?
Yeah,
I'm curious.
I would add a third one because I just like the number three.
Let's do it. What would you add?
Okay, so I would say moving abroad changes you because it teaches you that everything that you know is subjective. Everything that you know or you believe to be true, the minute you cross the border into another country, doesn't exist anymore. Really teaches you how like everyone is living in their own kind of I was gonna speak in Spanish, propio, in their own like proper idea and vision of how the world is. And the minute you step into another country, you realize like, whoa, yeah.
You strip away the veil. I love
Mhm.
well said. Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Once you cross
Yeah.
that border, it's a whole new world out there.
once that passport is stamped, that's what I think of. Once that passport is stamped and you walk across, it's a whole new world, and everything that you have known to be true is kind of challenged, changed, or you realize doesn't exist. And I think that that's why there's so many seekers that are drawn to moving abroad, right?
I
Um,
yeah,
yeah.
for
Okay.
sure.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for coming on again and being a guest on Roaming the Now. If anyone wants to get in touch with you, what is the best way?
Oh, wow, multaricoaching.com if you need a coach, and Todo Bien Colombia if you wanna visit Colombia, todobincolombia.com.
Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you so much again. This is your host, Marisol, signing off of this episode of Roaming the Now. I hope that you are enjoying wherever you are in the world. Take care.
Thank you, Marisol.
Thanks for catching this episode of Roaming the Now. If you have not already, make sure to like and subscribe. And as always, wherever you are in the world, I hope you are enjoying Roaming the Now.